Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of our blind tasting virtual series. I'm really excited that there are about 20 people here so far. I would expect that about 15 more. Right now is mute all so that we don't have all of your background noise. But just before I do, just say hi. Look and see all these great people. You can see the grid, like so much. Like I'm gonna take a photo actually. Proud of us. And it's really nice to see all these same faces. And so, yeah, so before we get started, say hi to your neighbor. You can chat with them. Obviously, you guys know by now, the chat section is very exciting. So please feel free to be as interactive as you want. And even though you're going on mute, we'll unmute people as it's time to talk. And if you have any questions that are live questions that you don't want to put in the chat, please feel free to unmute. It's just, it's really fun. So this week we're going to be talking about pyrazines and herbaceous qualities in wine. And we're also going to be talking about florals, which we all know are terpenes in wine, but there's some other, I guess you can call them impact aromas or things we can do to wine to make it smell floral besides having terpenes in our grapes. So as we go through and start talking about the qualities of these different compounds that adds floral or herbaceous, I just want you to smell your own wine, and if you have the backpack wines, great, we can talk about those. If you have any of your own wines, hopefully they have some element of an herbaceous quality for one reason or another, and or a floral quality for one reason or another. And if you don't, and you're just drinking something delicious, like that's not following the theme, that's fine too. We can live vicariously through all of our descriptions. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I was saying to the group earlier, we have some updates from our business if you want to hear them. But you know, as you know, a few of us are in other states besides New York City. I hope everyone's safe. I hope if you are in a city where there's an increase in coronavirus cases, that you're staying safe and as healthy as can be, and your families and everyone in your life are healthy. In New York City, so far, fingers crossed, we have been able to keep the cases of coronavirus, COVID-19, I guess, at a low enough level that New York City is in a sort of phase, I guess you can call it 4 or 3, so I can't even keep track. But what it means for my businesses at Cork Buzz is that we are allowed to open outside seating and takeout and delivery, but we are not allowed to have anyone inside the walls in terms of indoor dining. And I think we don't know when we will be able to, and I guess the mayor and the governor will tell us. So to make lemonade out of lemons, we're building a little bit of a small outdoor kind of like seating area in front of Cork Buzz in Union Square. I believe the seating will be live on Friday of this coming week, which is to say, if there's any need or want for you to come and see our staff and support them, just give us a call or check Resi, because if it rains or if something happens and we can't have outdoor seating, I don't want you guys to be displaced. We really appreciate all of your business, and we know how much, you should know how much you mean to us. To even suggest that you would try and come is an amazing thing. We're launching these staycation wine dinners starting Wednesday, so our chef is back. We have our house-made ricotta for sale. We have a small snack menu, and we're going to be doing both the clam bakes and some Tuscan summer dinners and a vegetarian feast and a mezze dinner, which you can order for takeout or delivery. And so that, and of course, for the limited seating, we're going to have those dinners available. So you can check out our website. I'm planning on sending out an email blast. I just haven't gotten to it yet. just announcing all the kind of strange things that's going to happen. We're doing a wine through, like kind of like a drive through, but a wine through at Cork Bus Chelsea Market starting Saturday this week. So we'll have like a window slash guy, gal serving wines by the glass and by the bottle. There's like these amazing taco joints that sandwich our Chelsea Market 15th Street entrance. So if you feel like having a really good fish taco and stopping by and getting a glass of something delicious from our bar and walking to the High Line, or you find yourself on 15th between 9th and 10th on Saturday, we'll be there. But enough of the commercials. I'm only updating you because a few of you asked. You just look for our emails. If you don't get them, just you can join our mailing list on corkbuzz.com. So today we're talking about blind tasting. I asked some volunteers if they would mind describing one of their favorite grapes and or just having a conversation about what that grape means to us, just to kick it off and encourage as much participation in describing wine as you feel comfortable with. So I see Danielle's smiling face, and I see that she has a great background. There were some frogs in her background earlier. So Danielle, tell me about what you were emailing me, and just say, let's have the conversation about those wines, and then I'll chime in.
Sure. Okay, so my favorite, well, I like Italian wine. So my absolute favorite is Brunello, but I really love Barolo too. And I get them confused all the time, especially when I'm doing them blind. So what I think the both that are similar is that they're both super dry, high in acid, high in tannins, and earthy. But if I think about Brunello, I think the one word that I describe it is like umami, very savory. Mm-hmm. So they both have that red brick quality in the glass, but I think Brunello is just a little bit bigger of a wine. Both like red dried fruit. I think Brunello has some black fruit too. It has that, still earthy and dry, but it has that oak quality, like tobacco and chocolate, stuff like that. I also get a lot of herbaceousness in Brunello, actually in both of them, but I guess, yeah, in both. And on the palate, just like really great tannic and acid structure, dry, and then just like that amazing juicy, long dry finish that's so earthy and wonderful.
I love that. So I would say I completely agree with Danielle that first of all, these two grapes, Sangiovese in the case of the Tuscany region, and more specifically, as Danielle was talking about, the Montalcino region, and we call this clone of Sangiovese Brunello, Sangiovese versus Nebbiolo. So Nebbiolo being the grape in Barolo Barbaresco, and forgetting the regions for a minute. So let's just talk straight up Sangiovese versus Nebbiolo in terms of grape. I put the red wine grid up here just so we can see some of the qualities that we would use, the descriptors reminding us about that. So the first thing that Danielle said is she loves those grapes, and so do I. And I think if we had to give them like one quality in common that was the most important quality in common, we would say the word structure. And she perfectly defined the structure as the tannin and the acid. So when we think about a box, it has a structure, maybe it has sides and it has a top and a bottom. So for sure, the beauty of these Italian superstars, if you will, is that they have acid and tannin at a very high level. And remember, I mentioned sometimes in wine, we are afraid to say the words high or full or extremes like low. There's no doubt in my mind that you should be using high tannin and high acid to describe both the Nebbiolo and the Sangiovese grape, unless of course there's some exception, right? It's 1990 Barolo, maybe the tannins have softened and maybe they're medium plus, but they will still be very high comparatively to other world-class grapes. But if we're starting at appearance, both of those wines are garnet. And believe it or not, I think it's really an important conversation to be had that they start by being garnet even in their youth. If you can recall from class 1, we talked about the fact that wine loses color or becomes garnet over time. So when I see an orange wine, a garnet color rim or a garnet hue, my mind says old. Now, when I smell young Nebbiolo and young Sangiovese, the best part about it is we're seeing garnet, so our mind's going, oh, this is old, but then we smell it and it smells like fresh fruit. So that's when you have to say, well, I thought it was old because it was garnet, but now I'm looking at it and it's young. So could it be a grape that is early oxidative, right? So there are grapes that look older even when they're young. So I love that. I actually say that a lot about a grape called Grenache as well, that it can look like it's 20 years older than it is. So then the other thing that I would say about the color of both Nebbiolo and Sangiovese is that sometimes it can look slightly hazy. You know, these are regions where we have more of a rustic style of winemaking, which is to say, you know, they probably don't fine and filter those wines. Of course, there's always exception. And so we look at these grapes that look like thin-skinned. So they look like you can read through them. If you remember opacity from our class versus transparent wine. So we kind of see. So if you're splitting hairs, you might say that Sangiovese can be slightly less slightly less transparent, maybe a hair more opaque. Again, this is you know, the other thing is when we think about these smells of these wines, and we will talk a little bit about this today, both of those wines have volatile acidity. So we would smell, and if you can remember, I said like a varnish smell, like kind of like a nail polish remover. We'll talk about it later. Some sort of high tone. When I say high tone, I mean it gets in my nose and it kind of almost tickles the kind of between my eyes, where my third eye would be. So we have that in a lot of Italian wines, not just the two we mentioned, but we can find that in Amarone and things like that. Then in terms of intensity, besides the smell of VA, the intensity can be a little more muted in Nebbiolo versus Sangiovese. So it's I would say, I love this reference. I say that Nebbiolo is like Pinot Noir and Sangiovese can be like Cabernet blends. Now this is, again, this is once you're splitting hairs because these are very similar. Sangiovese and Nebbiolo, a lot of MS, Master Sommelier students will get them mistaken for each other. But let's say we had to say, we're almost at our conclusion and we can't decide between Brunello and Barolo. We might say to ourselves, if one of them had to be Burgundy, if one of them had to be Pinot Noir, which one of these would it be? And if one of them had to be Bordeaux, which one of these would it be? And so what I think is Nebbiolo is like Pinot Noir with tannin. So you smell in Nebbiolo red fruit. So we find that in Pinot Noir. So we can find cherries and cranberries and raspberries in Nebbiolo. Whereas when we're describing Sangiovese, we might think red and black fruit, which is very common in Bordeaux blends. So Sangiovese can have red plum and it can have black plum and it can be red cherry and it could be black cherry. So again, you know, don't beat yourself up if you mistake one for another, but if you really had them side by side and that opportunity presented, just think about that. And Sangiovese can have some underripe for sure. It can definitely be tart red cranberry and little teeny berries, but it also can have perfectly ripe fruit. It can have both what I might describe as small berry and bigger, fleshier fruit, so plum and cherry. A lot of times with Nebbiolo, I only get underripe fruit, but there are some times in Nebbiolo what we might call a dried fruit and a sour fruit. It's depending on the story or the hillside where it grows or the vintage. You can get kind of an uneven ripening in Nebbiolo where you get some sort of dried, maybe even blueberry, but then a sour cranberry. Okay, well, Danielle said it perfectly with the savory herbs, which is a topic for today, right? We're talking about herbaceousness in wine. Sangiovese can have almost like a tomato leaf quality, where you can, if you imagine going to your tomato plants right now and rubbing your hands all over them and smelling that like leafy tomato vine, that's a really good descriptor for Sangiovese. And you might even say to yourself, a really good Tuscan wine can smell like a tomato sauce. So it can have tomato, it can have that green savory, the tarragon, the basil, the fresh herbs. You don't necessarily get that in Nebbiolo. Both wines have an earthy quality to them. Maybe in Sangiovese we get forest floor, we can get like kind of a mulchy, more, I would imagine like leafy smell, like forest floor, wet leaves. And in Nebbiolo, we often say truffles. We say more of a mushroomy aroma. So one is organic, Nebbiolo, organic earth, and a combination of inorganic, like rocks in kind of the galestro soil that you find in Tuscany, along with some earthy forest floor. Again, you know, it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, how dare you confuse one for the other. You know, they really are similar, but if we think about how we can separate them, that's really helpful. For wood, they both tend to use in the traditional ways used oak, large format oak. We might call it botti or large barrel in Italy. So that's not going to help us. You know, the more modern producers, which hopefully we're not doing blind tastings of modern producers of Barolo or Tuscan, because those will get really confusing. They use new oak, but for the most part, we're talking about old oak. So that might be a hint. And then for the fruit, we have what we said on the palate. The difference is, if you had to say, which we sometimes do when we're teaching people about these two grapes, we'll say, which one drives the bus? Is it the tannin that you're left with? So is your mouth at the last second more dry, or is it more salivating? And I guess a lot of people will say, if the tannin is the last thing you're left with, then it is definitively Nebbiolo. And if the acid is the last thing you're left with, then it's definitively Sangiovese. Now, with that said, remember when I talked to you about structure, I said the tricky part when something is high acid and high tannin is that because they have an opposite sensation in your mouth, one might even make you think that the other one is not there. So that's the real tricky part, right? So my mouth is salivating from Sangiovese, and my mouth has so much acid, and my mouth is dry because tannins are high in Sangiovese. So I don't notice the acid because my mouth is drying out. So when people only use the tannin versus acid for deciphering Nebbiolo versus Sangiovese, I think it can be a little bit misleading. Hopefully that helps. But why do I say if it tastes like Pinot Noir with tannin, it's Barolo, and if it tastes like Bordeaux without the new oak, it's Brunello? Because the herbaceous quality in Cabernet Sauvignon, which we'll talk about in a bit, Pyrazines, can remind us of that tomato leaf. So sometimes, actually, my friends would be like, oh, well, I'm tasting Brunello and I can't decide if it's Cabernet from Bordeaux, like from some region like Pauillac, or if it's Brunello. Well, I would say, ask yourself, do you smell like earthiness from old oak, or do you smell vanilla? Because you're not ever really going to find a Bordeaux, a premium Bordeaux without oak. So are we all thoroughly confused by now, by me? So let's see what you guys are saying. Okay, where Nebbiolo high acid because it's grown at a cooler climate, or is it naturally high acid grape, or is that even a thing? I think they're both naturally high in acid, Sangio and Nebbiolo, and perhaps, you know, you can feel more of the acid in sometimes in cooler vintages for sure, but they're both not necessarily because of acid versus tannin, or sorry, because of cool climate. They're both just high acid grapes in general. Okay, so let's see, who else? We had someone, why can't I remember right now? I can look at my email. They wanted to describe Sauvignon Blanc to me. Does anyone feel like jumping in and talking to me about Sauvignon Blanc? Who was that?
Hey, that was me, Laura.
Yay. Okay. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. Thank
Good.
you. What do you know?
All right. So it's Sauvignon Blanc, like it is one of my I guess I'd say like more of my favorite, one of my favorite white wines. Just because it's always so distinctive in the characteristics and the quality. To me, like, I mean, I know that Chardonnay is like always a big thing, but there's always been like a soft spot for me with Sauvignon Blanc, and I think that a lot of it is because of the that herbaceousness, like particularly that like Pyrazines quality. I didn't know what that was until this class, so thank you. Because I'd already like watched all these different videos, and I'm like, I keep hearing people say Pyrazines, what is that? And so that herbaceousness, that like green apple, that pear, that lemon, sometimes like a little flinty or like some, not chalky, but just like a flinty kind of characteristic, some sort of like rocky mineral note, and then also just like really high or medium plus in acidity.
Mm-hmm.
So on the nose, they're always like also pretty like intense. I would say like a anywhere between medium plus and high, because it's like you can just, and then it's like, wow, it's all of these aromas are just coming in.
Absolutely right.
And I think that like structure wise, I would say that like the structure for most of the, at least the Sauvignon Blancs that I've had, they're pretty moderate. Like there's plenty of room that like each of the different grapes, not grapes, but different flavors are able to shine and indicate that like, hey, I'm here, without it being too precise. It's kind of like, it can be like a little wave, if you will. And usually the finish on them is moderate. I would say at least, yeah, from Sancerre, like most of the ones that I've had, they're like medium plus on the finish, like just enough where it's like my mouth is salivating. I'm enjoying all of the, the pear, the lemon, the green apple, all those characteristics just like linger for more than a few seconds, but not like, infinite, like some of the super long finishes. Yeah.
And I owe you an email because we're tagging and you're it. I'm it, right? So don't. Well, just so everyone is aware, we talk about language and how we use language and to describe wine. And I love hearing from everyone. So as you guys feel more comfortable, please, volunteer, because it takes a lot to volunteer, and it's really going to help you long term, because you start to realize and form ways to describe wine that are unique to you, which is the only thing that matters. So what I would say, to echo what Vincent said about Sauvignon Blanc, is I have this way of I didn't tell you guys this is my mantra yet. This is one of Laura's isms of describing wine. Sometimes we must describe wine technically, like very, very infrequently, but sometimes we must. Like if we're writing lab notes, or we're a winemaker and we're trying to describe wine, or maybe someone mandates that we describe wine technically. So we would say pyrazine, we would say terpenes, we would say ethyl acetate, we would say monoterpenes and linalool and sotalon and blah, blah, blah. So they're important if we are looking to talk to those people that might want to communicate that way. And then there are the descriptors that we use. Of course, I said last week that my basil might be the way you smell, let's say mint, or when I describe passion fruit, you might think of it as guava. And there's a sensory memory, which I think is super special. The idea that a wine can take you back to your grandmother's house and remind you of like the sausages that she was making in a frittata, or that you remember there were honeysuckles outside your church growing up, and you can identify a muscat as being the smell of your church. So there's the sensory, beautiful memory part of wine, and that has a very important sales place, if you will. Like, I'm not going to describe to my dad that is just starting to get wine and being interested in the technical way. I'm going to remind him that wine is bringing people together. So I'm going to use the sensory memory descriptors. And what we are doing in our kind of studies of wine is trying to bridge that gap. So sometimes it's your brain, sometimes it's your heart, and sometimes it's kind of like your instincts that you should be trying to use all three of these in blind tasting. So with Vincent's Sauvignon Blanc descriptor, you know, I often also say, like, when people like a grape, what is it about it that they love? So I have this client right now, and he's trying to find wine for his wife. His wife is into wine for the first time, and he says she loves Sauvignon Blanc. But then every Sauvignon Blanc we give her, she doesn't love. So I think what he's telling me she loves is she first found out she liked wine by drinking Sauvignon Blanc. So she's accidentally mistaking the fact that she likes some wine for that. So it turns out she didn't like the New Zealand one. She didn't like the Sancerre one. She didn't like, we sent her a Greek wine. She didn't like that Sauvignon Blanc. The next time she loved a wine, it was Chardonnay. And I said, oh, okay, you know, oh no, I'm sorry. The next time she liked a Sauvignon Blanc, it was a Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc. And we discovered that it's because it tastes fruity and it tastes like oaky. So now we sent her 4 Chardonnays and she liked every one of them. It's because she just says she likes the grape because, you know, that was the first grape she learned. With that said, I think Sauvignon Blanc has this ability to be very pungent. So Vincent said it perfectly, like, it just jumps out of the glass. If it's New Zealand, it smells like jalapeno and bell pepper and passion fruit. If it's Sancerre, it smells like flinty, like you said so perfectly, minerals and like citrus zest. If it's from, actually from California, it tends to smell like whatever the winemaker does. So it can be very tropical because it's from a warm climate. Remember, Sauvignon Blanc has thiols, so it can smell tropical but not taste tropical because of that, like guava from thiols. So yeah, so that was a good way to kick it off. So remind you guys about the grid. Here it is. I want to talk about pyrazines in a little more depth. So we're talking about herbaceous qualities today. So there's something called 2-methoxy-3-isobutyrene pyrazines. We're not using this anymore, Vincent. We're only going to say it's closely associated with the Bordeaux grapes, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. If we know that Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc are the parent grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon. So let me tell you this. Sauvignon Blanc probably has the most intense versions of pyrazines than any other grape. We smell that cut grass or the jalapeno. I sometimes would think in New World, it used to remind me of being in college and going to like the bars where you had jalapeno poppers, like really pungent smells, right? So Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Franc, those are the parent grapes. Cabernet Franc is the red version of Sauvignon Blanc in terms of herbaceous qualities. Cabernet Sauvignon has slightly less green quality. So if you had to order them in order from highest pyrazine Bordeaux grapes to lowest, it would probably be Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Franc. The other one that's not up there, but it is a Bordeaux grape, is Carmenere, right? So Carmenere is one of the grapes we find in Chile. It was originally a Bordeaux grape it's all but, you know, left Bordeaux. But that grape has a very strong pyrazine. So this is interesting. When I smell a vegetal quality in my red wine, and I think, wow, this smells green and ripe. It smells like blackberries and it smells like black plums that have been really ripe in their fruit quality, but then I get this really strong vegetal. I'm describing New World, very extreme pyrazine. It's very, very likely that that wine is from Chile and it's Carmenere. I think a lot of times when we're Bordeaux, when we're tasting pyrazines, we forget about Carmenere. So much so I forgot to put it on the slide, but thankfully I remembered to tell you. So Cabernet Franc, and that's a really beautiful grape that you find a lot of times in the Loire Valley, right? We find that in the region of Chinon, we find that in a region called Bourgogne, and we know that it's a blending grape in the right bank of Bordeaux, and also to smaller, to a lesser degree in the left bank. So Cabernet Franc, thing. For me, it's more color-wise, it's a lighter, it's a thinner skin. It doesn't always have to be that purple kind of dark, opaque. So, you know, when we're thinking about, oh, I get a little green, I get a little pyrazine, that's more like Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, there's another way we can find a pyrazine smell in wine, which this was a really interesting story. There's a ladybug where there's kind of like they have a taint, which is there. It's called 2-isopropyl-3-methoxypyrazine, where if a ladybug is killed in a wine vat, or if it's an extreme case like there was in one of the vintages of Burgundy in 2004, where there was a ladybug, I guess you can call it invasion, right? I mean, I don't know. But you can get this kind of smell of green even if you're not using Cabernet Franc or Cabernet Sauvignon. So there is a way to get a green from pyrazines without having it be those grapes that are common. So for example, I did my Master Sommelier exam in London in the Dorchester when I was, I don't know, 25. And the week before, this is why tasting is very important and memory is very important. The week before I went to my MS exam, I went to a restaurant in New York called Crew, and it had the 2004 vintage of Burgundy. And it smelled green. It smelled like seedy. You could use the word pine resin, or you could use like a descriptor of, this is a bad way to sell a wine, but you might say bug spray. You know, the smell of course, what do you cover up the smell of chemicals with, but maybe something green and minty. So I remember smelling this red wine, and it was kind of like a lightish color, like a relatively medium color red, and smelling a green quality. And I said, oh yeah, this is Cabernet Franc for sure. All the qualities reminded me of Cabernet Franc, but there was something at the end that the tannin was a little too light to be Cabernet Franc, but I couldn't think of any other green, like light-skinned red grape. So it turns out, in my practice at this restaurant, it was Pinot Noir from the 04 vintage of Burgundy. So the tannins were much more similar to Pinot Noir than they would have been for the Cabernet Franc grape. So then fast forward a week, 2 weeks later, I go to the MS exam and I get the similar, I mean, I don't think it was the same producer. Everyone in the MS exam said, oh, this is Cabernet Franc, because they got a green vegetal quality. And it was really because it was the buggy vintage of 04. So something to keep in mind. There are, like I said, with the Sangiovese grape, there are things that can remind us of pyrazines, but are actually not pyrazines. So if Sangiovese has a herbaceous fresh herb quality, you might mistake it for pyrazine. So we're really looking for something that's underripe. If you pick grapes too early, you can get more extreme versions, because what happens is that veraison, which is when the spike in sugar happens in red wine production, you get a reduction of pyrazine. So as grapes get phenolically ripe, they get riper, the sugars increase, some of that green aroma might decrease a little bit. So if you pick, like, I can recall, like there are certain regions in northeastern Italy where you can get certain grapes that are red, but maybe they shouldn't be picked so soon. There's a grape called Schioppettino. There's some Merlot that can smell slightly green, even though it doesn't have a strong amount of pyrazine. So you can trick yourself into thinking you have a pyrazine in a grape if you pick too early. You know, there's for a long time Long Island Merlot, it just smelled very green and vegetal. So you're wanting to look and see if the fruit is ripe and you're still getting green, that's probably from pyrazine. If the fruit smells tart and underripe and green, it might be that it's just a cool climate red grape varietal. I hope that makes sense. I guess I'll check and see if there's any major confusion in the chat right now. To me, this almost seems, okay, so you're talking about that. Okay, great. Interesting, makes sense. Where in the Pyrazine order does Carmenere fit to compare to Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Sauvignon Blanc? It's almost at times as high in Pyrazines to Sauvignon Blanc or Cabernet Franc. It can be really, really, really high in Carmenere, that is. It's much more than Cabernet Sauvignon. So yeah. So one of my friends used to say, if it smells funky and green and is light in color, it's Cabernet Franc. And oh, interesting too. Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley will generally not have new oak. So let's ask ourselves two questions. I smell green. Is it old world or new world? Meaning, does it have more earth or more fruit? Oh, it's old world. It's funky. Okay, great. I'm still in the running for Cabernet Franc. Oh, it smells like vanilla, some funk, and it smells like vegetal. It can't be most likely Loire Valley, but perhaps now we're thinking it's Bordeaux. So maybe it's a ripe bank Bordeaux with a lot of Cab Franc. That's where the vanilla is coming from. That's where the earthiness is coming from. Oh, okay, let's imagine I choose my own adventure, and my adventure is New World. I smell ripe fruit, I smell new oak, and I smell high pyrazines. Likely that is not Cabernet Sauvignon, but rather Carmenere from Chile. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Okay, good question. All right, let's talk about monoterpenes. We mentioned some of these smells in previous kind of classes, but we have this smell of floral. So we have something called linalool, citronelle, and alpha terpenol. So these are all types of monoterpenes, and terpenes are the smell of floral. And so we often think about floral in white wine. Probably one of the most intense fragrance of white wine that has a high amount of linalool is in the actual grape flesh of muscat. So we know the muscat grape, I mentioned this once before, but it can smell, oh, my dog wants to get into the class, hold on. She's scratching at the door. She hates closed doors, so she's here now. She was barking. The actual grape, muscat, has a high amount of this linalool in its skin. If you guys don't know some of these smells, you could buy some perfume. Actually, I wear a scent whenever I'm not tasting wine called neroli. And neroli, as you can see here, nerol it's a smell of orange and rose. But you can have the geranium or the soapy smells or that kind of like really musky smell. The musky smell is when it smells like clean and floral funky and floral at the same time. Like you might even think about leaving a thing of flowers where the water goes stale and you smell the green part of the flower, you know, that funk. So you can have a little bit of that. If you remember, muscat is the parent grape or one of the parent grapes of Torrontés. So if you were to think about muscat as a grape, it's going to smell like orange and roses. It also smells very grapey. It's one of the few grapes that smells like green grapes, which is rare. So it smells young and it smells floral. And because muscat is the parent grape of Torrontés mixed with another grape called Criolla Chica, you can get some sort of floral aroma and muscat that's a little more potent and maybe a little more kind of candied or confected in Torrontés. So what I would say is when I'm looking at those two very strong grapes that have high amounts of linalool, I'll often say, okay, muscat will smell funky and floral, and Torrontés will smell almost sweet or artificial and floral. And we know that there's a grape Gewürztraminer that also has a high amount of monoterpenes. The Gewürztraminer's secret, if you will, is that it smells a little floral, but also spicy. So the word Traminer, Gewürztraminer, the name is spice. So for that, I might use the descriptor of gingerbread. You know, when you have like a gingerbread house or a gingerbread cookie rather, so you get kind of like a spice that's sweet, but is almost also savory. Gewürztraminer can have that. The other real marker for Gewürztraminer, since we're on the subject of talking about terpenes, is the lack of acid. You know, there's no mistaking Gewürztraminer in terms of structure because it has none. So you get all this floral, and then when you check in on the acid, it almost has like a flatness to it. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Gewürztraminer, but they're a very low acid grape. So you might get something that feels a little bit like thick and not have that edge that we describe as like a laser. Actually, Muscat does have a higher amount of acid, and it has almost a phenolic bitterness. So it makes my mouth feel like it has tannin as well. It's kind of like when you take the grape, a grape, and you chew on the bitterness of the seed or the stem itself. That's more Muscat, but you don't really get that in Gewürztraminer. Just remember that there are red grapes that have these terpenes. So we have Pinot Noir. You can smell Pinot Noir and think about potpourri, dried flowers, roses. Same thing with Nebbiolo. We can get these dried roses and aromas because those grapes have terpenes. Sometimes in Syrah, in Malbec, you might find purple flowers, especially when you're describing Malbec. For me, it's always like violets. I remember, speaking of sensory memory, my grandmother used to take care of these African violets. She had them all over her home, and they were so hard to keep alive. So she'd never let me touch them, and I would sneak over and smell them, and that's the smell of Malbec to me. This very strong, dried floral. So there you have it. That was my, when she's not looking, I'm smelling her flowers. Why do you think I'm now a sommelier? So thank you for her. So anyway, this is floral qualities in wine. Now let's talk about things that might smell floral even when they're not. Actually, this is something, ethyl amyl acetate. It's an ester. So an ester is something that smells very strong, right? So you can imagine there are types of yeast that we use during fermentation. And depending on the type of yeast, you can have a strong smell, or you can have a light smell, or you can have a distinct smell. So there is this smell of almost like a fruitiness or a floral quality that you can get as a result of ethyl amyl acetate, which makes a wine smell fruity, delivers like this banana. If you've never had a pear drop candy, they're available, I think, mostly in the UK, but they smell almost like a banana drop, like a fake floral, fake banana, fake pear. So anyway, this is a type of, this is a result of a yeast. But when you ferment wine at cold temperatures, you can retain some of that yeast aroma. So it's often associated with pinotage. You can get it. Young white wines can have that, where they smell like banana. But it will dissipate when the bottle is when you age the wine. So you don't really get it in older wines. It's a common aroma in wheat beer. If you are familiar with the smell of wheat beer, that might be a good way for you to identify that. It is a chief flavoring for bubble gum. So you can get, if you remember juicy fruit. Do you remember juicy fruit gum? The yellow, right? That's the smell of ethyl amyl acetate. So if you don't know that, go out and buy some juicy fruit, and then next time you have a wine from Beaujolais that goes through carbonic maceration, which is they're keeping a wine in a tank, and they're letting the yeast really incorporate, because they're doing something which I'll explain in a minute. You'll get that smell of bubble gum, of that juicy fruit gum. Or banana. So here's an interesting thing. You know, we often associate old world with earth and new world with fruit. And then we have Beaujolais. We're like, well, Beaujolais smells fruity to me. It smells like banana. It smells almost like, for a moment, you think you're drinking New World. Well, this is coming from this quality ethyl amyl acetate. So let me explain carbonic maceration for those of you that don't know. So we have intercellular fermentation. So remember, you take sugar, grape juice, right? You add yeast eats sugar, you get alcohol, you get carbon dioxide. Most of the time you take a cluster of grapes for red wine production, and you crush the grapes, the yeast in the grapes, the skins and the juice fall to the bottom of the tank. The yeast eats the sugar, but there's an open environment of which the esters, right, the smells, are allowed to release into the environment or into the winery. So the smell of freshly fermenting wine is very intense in smell, but it's generally allowed to go into the atmosphere. When you're making carbonic maceration, the whole idea is that you're trapping fermentation. So you take a cluster of grapes and you do the whole yeast process, but you close a tank. So it's almost like the tank is keeping all the esters inside, right? And the berries are exploding. So the berries, because of the pressure of carbon dioxide and because they're not allowed to escape, you get a lot of color because berries are basically just fermenting intercellular. But you have a lot of that smell of banana, and it's almost like something, you look at this dark purple color wine, it smells fruity, it smells like banana. This is Beaujolais. But sometimes in Beaujolais, the growers, so they're not using carbonic maceration for like cru Beaujolais, and they'll say that there was this yeast that was popular in the 70s and 80s that's really to blame for the region's smell of banana. So next time you're drinking Beaujolais, just ask yourself if you smell that. Okay, so there's this guy. This guy is funny. I don't know, I had to put him in there. It seems funny. Ethyl acetate is another smell that we sometimes can mistake for floral. It smells, it's a little bit like volatile acidity, although it's a different microorganism, but it smells high tone. So we smell it up in our high part of our nose. It's another ester, so it's another smell made from acetic acid and ethanol. So when you have essentially not vinegar, but before vinegar is acetic acid and a combination of alcohol. Alcohol lifts up smell. So when something is high in alcohol, you'll smell it up in your nose. And so it'll make things more volatile. So anyway, you can imagine oxygen is going to keep the smell of ethyl acetate away. So if you have a reductive wine environment, you won't get a lot of that ethyl acetate or smell of kind of like a little varnish. If you are allowing oxygen in, so you're making large format winemaking, like if you're making Amarone, you'll often get this ethyl acetate aroma of varnish because you're making wine in a big vat. Same why we get this often in Italian wine. So if I smell something that's kind of like maybe soy or maybe balsamic, that's somewhat of like a kind of sweet, earthy, but also like high tone aroma. It could be because it's made in a large format, and it could be because it's Italian. All right, hopefully that helps. Okay, so now here's what we're gonna do. You know that we are, we started at 7:30, so I said like give or take, we're gonna give ourselves an hour and a half. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to describe a wine to you, but I also want to go through some of these grapes. I'm going to show you them quickly, but I'm going to go back to them. And we're going to talk about the common grapes and what the markers and what the sort of sights and nose and things should be for them. So what I want to do first is before we go into the backpack wines and before we talk a little bit more about some of these things, I want to describe, let me go to the grid. I'm going to describe my wine to you. Okay. So I want to talk, the first week we talked a lot about color, and I really wanted to use my wine as a teaching opportunity for you. And you'll probably understand it more after the reveal, but hopefully I can get a good visual of this in my camera here. This is a white wine. Hopefully you can see it. This is not the backpack wine. This is just something from my cellar that I had to talk about this week because it has so much, it's going to be really cool. That's all I'll say. Okay, so I have a clear white wine. It is almost pale straw. It has a slight hint of like a little bit of gold at the side. So gold Sometimes to be romantic or poetic, you could say gold at the hips. that's a joke. It's like at the sides of the glass, right? But anyway, this is a clear straw colored wine. It's not on our grid, but I want to mention something super cool, which is called brilliance. We sometimes talk about how brilliant a wine is. This is maybe a quality that is often hard to avoid. So MS people, sometimes we use, oh, am I frozen? Can you hear me? I'm okay now? Okay, because everyone looks frozen to me. It said my connection was unstable, which seems weird. So I'm okay though, right, Michael? I'm cutting in and out. Okay, hold on. Okay, I think I'm good now. I'm good now? Okay, sorry guys. I don't know why the connection's unstable. So anyway, what I was saying is brilliance in a wine. Brilliance is the way light reflects off a wine. And we sometimes use things like brilliant, star bright, day bright, dull. I have not talked about this yet with you all. So when a wine is very brilliant, it's almost like you could see a reflection, and this is for white wine only, in the wine. So for me, this wine that I'm drinking, it is so brilliant, it's as if I could put my lipstick on by looking in the reflection of the glass. This is different, by the way, than the color. And brilliance is generally related to alcohol. The more brilliant, the lower the alcohol. So if I was drinking Viognier from California, that would mean that the light does not reflect off of it. Am I frozen again? Nope, I'm not frozen because you're not frozen. Michael, can you see me? Let me see here. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Woo! Nope. Hi, can you hear me now, guys? Yep. Are we good? All right, I'm sorry. Who knows what's going on? And that rowing of the boat, that was my other internet. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm gonna keep it off the share screen for now, just because it's actually fine since I'm describing a wine. So I was going through and talking about the brilliance of a wine, and the lower the alcohol, the more brilliant the wine is. So for this wine here, it's like as if I could see my reflection on it. If the wine was dull, that would be an indication that the wine is high in alcohol. So I think the only time it really matters is when it's extreme. So like, for example, this is so reflecting so much light, it's just something I have to mention. But if it was just like a normal wine, it probably would just be like hard to tell if it was medium, or sorry, star bright, day bright, you know. So just think about that next time you're looking at wine and you see like, whoa, it's shimmering. It looks like a diamond, a really flashy diamond, right? So, okay, so with that said, I have this wine that smells, if we're looking at the grid, which I can put back up now, for you all. said on my connection's not going to be good. Okay, for the nose, it smells clean. However, there's a very strong aroma of something like inner tube. I could use as a descriptor. I could say rubber. I could say like a really strong mineral, almost like a liquid mineral. If you've ever had a kind of like a smell of a wet rock and after the rain, it smells very strongly like that. And the fruit is stone fruit, 100% stone fruit, apricot and nectarine, and like a marmalade made of apricot. And there is like an orange zest, almost if you had a marmalade and you wanted to keep it fresh, you would zest some orange on top of it. So very ripe and a little bit of an aroma that smells dried. There's honey here, there's saffron, there's ginger. Whew. And there's terpenes. So that's my technical term, but I describe the terpenes by using aromas like white flowers, dried honeysuckle, buttercups. So there's some yellow flowers. There's almost like a chamomile tea or a sort of a green and white flower mixed together. No evidence of oak, although there smells like oxygen is in this wine. So it doesn't smell like stainless steel aging. Maybe there's older barrels used because I am getting a mushroom or like a mushroom tea aroma. And the wine smells like it's some age. And how do we describe some age versus youthful versus a lot of age? Well, when we're describing secondary and tertiary flavors, like when I say tea, when I say liquid mineral, when I say petrol, I'm stepping away from fruit and I'm getting into things that would probably only be there if the wine had a little bit of age. So when a wine smells like grape juice, it's young. When a wine smells what we would use as a descriptor called vinous, which is kind of a little bit, you know, we're saying wine. We're describing wine as wine-like. That's what we mean when we say vinous, right? So, but it kind of means like with age. So this is in between. When I describe the fruit, wow, it's as if the fruit was drenched in like a very pure fruit syrup. Not to be confused with candied. It's like taking apricot and making the apricot dried and condensed and dripping with like pure fruit and not like as if I made artificial fruit cocktail. So we have apricot, we have nectarine, and a little bit of orange zest. You're noticing I'm not saying like lemon pith. I have a riper citrus like orange tangerine. There is still the floral. There is that nice little bit of honey spice. Botrytis is definitely here because all of those ginger qualities I'm describing. And because when I smell it, that mushroom, remember botrytis from last week? Botrytis is an earthy smell, but also the honey and drying grapes. So for me, the body of the wine is actually deceivingly medium plus. Now I have to tell you what the body is being driven by is glycerol. You remember when I talked about this week 1, I said there's almost like a thickness from glycerol. It's dry extract too. So it feels like thick, but that's where the body is coming from because the alcohol in this wine is low. If I had to give a number, it's like 7.5%, which is actually factual because I'm looking at the bottle. The acid is high and there's a presence of residual sugar. So this wine is, I would say maybe off dry, and the finish is long and it's driven by the ripeness of fruit and the botrytis and the syrupy kind of sappy fruit. And there's so much minerality on the palate too. It's just kind of like wet rocks and slate and stone, and you could almost say like blue color, blue slate stones. And what do you think I'm drinking, everyone? And so the guest says, oh sorry, Jimmy says Muscat from Alsace. Okay, so let me tell you what my acid is like. Wow, my mouth is really salivating. The acid is like a knife, and it's cutting through the thickness. So it's really sharp and pointed, but also the texture is there. So somebody said Alsace Riesling, a few other people, Mosel Riesling, Muscat, okay, New World Riesling. I'm not messing with you. The only thing I'm messing with you, Jeff, on is that this wine is the reason I really wanted to talk about it is because it's a lot older than it looks. I mean, this wine looks like it's 1 to 3 years old because it's clear and it's pale straw. And this is a trick about this grape. For some reason, this grape always looks younger than it is. So this is Riesling, and I am drinking Riesling, but I am drinking a German Riesling, and I'm drinking a Riesling from the Mosel. And this is a single vineyard Mosel wine. But the interesting thing is this is a 2009. So if you know, this is 2009 JJ Prüm Riesling. I swear, if you poured this for me, I would think it was 2018. Well, I wouldn't, only because it has the aroma, but the color looks like a very young wine. So just keep in mind, Riesling is one of those wines that has all the things perfectly suited to help it age. It has sugar. Sugar is a preservative. It has acid. Acid is a preservative. And Riesling itself is an age-worthy grape. So I think the combination of those things make you want to guess younger. Whenever you think you're drinking a very young Riesling, you should probably adjust the years by 10. Like I'm often like, oh, it's 2019. I'm gonna guess 9, because I'm always pleasantly surprised at how great it is. Okay, so hopefully you liked that description, and now we're gonna go to the red wine. I'm going to describe our red wine for you, and then ask anybody that wants to volunteer, either backpack or your own wines, after I'm done, to describe your wine. So here we have, it's hard to see, I know, a kind of hazy red wine. Whenever I say a description, if you want to test your knowledge, I want you to write, when I say hazy, I want you to say, what do you think that means to yourself, right? So I have a slightly hazy red wine. It looks like I took my fingers and put them all over my eyeglasses. I can read through the wine, so it's moderate transparent. And the color is mostly a pale ruby with a slightly pink edge. So you should be saying, oh, she means it's unfiltered. She means it's a thin-skinned grape. She means it is not Cabernet. She means it is perhaps a young, because she saw pink. So cause and effect, right? So on the nose, ooh, the wine, it has no flaws, but it has an intense ethyl acetate. Yeah, thanks. Hold on, I'm gonna mute you. Oh wait, everybody's unmuted. I don't know. Oh no, you're not. Okay, great. Okay, so it has that ethyl acetate smell. So it smells like banana, pear drop, a little bit of maybe carbonic maceration going on here, because it smells like a little bit like varnish. The interesting thing is the fruit is red, and it's mostly, I would say, like not a cherry, but a little bit bigger than that. So red plum, plum skin. There's a little bit of red berries, like a raspberry. For green aroma, there's definitely an herbaceous quality that's almost like resin, like that kind of like I was describing before, like a medicinal or kind of like a bug spray smell. Again, I probably would never say that to you if you were in my restaurant. I would say maybe pine or green herbs, but not bell pepper, just more like a savory resin. And there's a purple flower too, and maybe like violet. No new oak, and the wine smells very youthful. On the palate, we have red fruit. It's crunchy. I want you to use that word sometimes. Crunchy red fruit. It's as if like you have all the freshness of cranberries when they're frozen and they just pop with the freshness, but then it has a little bit of that stemmy kind of seedy of the grape. So the fruit is definitely finishing sour. That fruitiness that I was smelling of banana and kind of weird like carbonic maceration, it's not there on the palate. It's all dry, sour, red plum skin, black, a little bit of black fruit as well. And no evidence of new oak. The wine is dry. Body of the wine is very definitively medium with moderate plus acid. Tannins are medium. Alcohol is medium. The finish is long, and the finish is driven by this sort of crunchy, stemmy red fruit. So what am I drinking, everyone? So we have some answers so far. Some people are saying Gamay. And what? Okay, so now what we're going to do is, for those of you that don't always guess right, we want someone here to say what made you think Gamay. So because Nicole was the first one to write it in the chat, and then Sheila said it, and then Jimmy said it, and then you might all be thinking it. What to you, when was the point at which you said, I know you're right, I am drinking Gamay. So what else could it have been? And what else were you thinking originally? And what was the definitive aha moment for Gamay? Anyone? The color and the banana, right, the carbonic maceration. Now this, I don't think it has carbonic, but it definitely has that ethyl acetate yeast. So we have that kind of, that stemminess and also that pear drop and banana. They make you think of Gamay, yep. The color is right. And also we solidified it by the absence of the tannin, right? So the tannin in Gamay is very light. The crunchiness is so savory. It almost like literally smells, I know this sounds bad, but it smells like Raid. It's very like, very, very, very resiny. Okay, so we are drinking Beaujolais. And actually this Beaujolais is Morgon. It's from Lapierre and it's 2016. So 2016, Camille from Lapierre. So anyhow, all right, perfect for hot dogs. If you're grilling some hot dogs and you want to put some pickles on them, you can have some Beaujolais. It's quite nice with pork. So who wants to volunteer to describe their wine? Anyone? We have wine 1, 2, and 3 in the backpack, if anyone wants to go through those. I'm gonna see if you're chatting. Yep, Jimmy, I know you love your Lapierre, me too. Okay. Would anyone like to volunteer? Let's see. Should I call on someone? No. Oh, Savannah, yes, you could do your personal wine. Great. Unmute.
Cool. Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, great. Okay, so this wine, first of all, is clear. I would describe this as a star bright. On the nose, immediately, it's super aromatic. A lot of blossoms, but not necessarily white. Maybe like something more like an orange blossom, actually, or it reminds me of honeysuckle a little bit, somewhere between like an orange blossom and a honeysuckle.
Great.
Still very aromatic. I would say things that are probably more ripe to overripe on the nose. This is really nice. This has a lot of nice orange aspect to it. It has more of a waxy feature than what I was expecting. And as far as the quality of fruit, I'm still gonna go with something more ripe, kind of like nice in the middle. There's a good acid structure to it, but it's a little bit more round than it is sharp, which I don't think I would have expected this. There is the slightest aspect of kind of like saline and slate that I get from it, just like on the back end, kind of towards the finish. The alcohol is, it feels a little bit lower in alcohol, which feels kind of like a trick. I'm not very good at determining that myself, but the body is nice and round, I would say a medium plus. And then I would say the acid is right around a medium plus as well. There's like a guava aspect to it. So a little bit of tropical fruits.
Great. Where do you think guava is coming from, anyone? Maybe thiols? Because it's disconnected from the rest of the descriptor, right? So I don't think the thiols, I don't think the guava is coming from, it's such a warm climate. I think that the guava is probably coming from the grape or the fact that the grape has thiols, but let's see.
So that's pretty much like all I got as far as descriptors. Do you want me to tell you guys what it is?
Almost, but I want to ask some questions and clarify a few points for everybody, and I want to help you with the alcohol. So when we think about alcohol, in terms of we are unsure if it's light, medium, or full. And I know it's hard to go light, medium minus, medium, medium plus, high. I would just say disconnect your mind from having to pick one of those and say, what would you want to eat it with? Or what would it be acceptable to have when in a meal would it be acceptable? This is when you're struggling. So when you're struggling with definitive numbers or quantifying something, you might want to take it back to the heart way of tasting. So, okay, if I had to have this wine and it was in the course of a meal, am I having it with an appetizer of raw, these are your options, Savannah. Am I having it with a raw crudo? So I'm having like a scallop ceviche and I'm having that with citrus and it's just simple raw fish. Am I having it with like a cooked, almost like a seafood salad with where I might take the calamari and I might grill it so it's a little bit more body of the dish, and I have olive oil on my calamari salad so it has a little more thickness? Or am I having this with skate, like a brown butter skate or white fish that is like kind of richer? Which one of them?
I think based on the fact that this isn't as sharp acidity, I think I would probably go with the raw fish.
Okay, so maybe this is more medium body. It feels a little bit lighter.
Yeah. Also, I should note too that this is off dry.
Ooh, that's very important. So at first I thought you were describing Albarino because I thought you were saying the salinity. So if you're not familiar with salt or saline, you know, you can kind of imagine like when you get nori or sushi at a restaurant, that like kind of like savory thing. But the sweetness is throwing us. So I would say off dry, it kind of sounds like you're describing Chenin Blanc. You know, I would have a hard time thinking about, oh, but there's a thickness. What was the acid again?
It's a little bit more of a rounder acid. It's softer. It's not as astringent as I would expect. In general, this one is different than what I have been drinking for this varietal.
Okay, maybe it's Gewürztraminer, everybody. Does it have a lot of flowers, floral, or not really?
I think so, yeah, because at first I was like, oh, there's no orange blossoms. And then I was like, oh, there's a little bit of jasmine. Oh, there's some orange blossom. Then there's that like honeysuckle. So yeah, it's very, very aromatic and a lot of like floral notes to it.
Great. Okay, anyone else have options besides that? And you could tell us what we're drinking.
Okay, this is really delightful. I'm a big fan of it, even though it surprised me. This is the Black Girl Magic Riesling from McBride's Esters.
Nice, yay, good. It's really delicious. I'm glad to hear that. I'll have to check it out. So
it's really good. It's a 13.5, and the appellation is just California. I believe they grabbed from a couple different places.
Great. So maybe that we're getting a little bit of that tropical aroma because it is warm in California. Sheila, do you have a question?
Can she show their label again? I just want to see.
Black Girl Magic Riesling.
Awesome.
Thank
you.
Savannah. It's always fun to get a new producer, especially if it's like a commercial for the wine, because if you don't go out and buy it yourself, you can know exactly what you're getting next time you do want to try it. So is there anyone else that wants to volunteer before we conclude the evening? Do we have anybody drinking a red that's like dying to talk, speak out?
I can try to give it a go again.
Well, if not you, I mean, I'm happy to hear from you again, Vincent. Is anyone else wanting to volunteer too?
Mhm.
Looks like it's all you, Vincent. Everyone wants to hear from you, so let's hear it.
Awesome. Um, all right, so this is actually out of the backpack. This is wine number 2. Um, and let's see. So for me, I always have to remember like doing the grid with this format is just like I'm constantly retraining myself from WSET. So it's
For you,
like,
can I make it fair and put this grid up? Because when you're just starting, it's totally fine to just literally look at the grid and choose between these things and just read across of it, because you're going to get better at memorizing it if you're doing it in a strict routine. So here's
correct. All right, so this wine to me is, I would say, a clear, it's almost purple, but I'm gonna call ruby.
okay, good.
The rim is also clear, no evidence of gas, no sediment. Viscosity, I would say is, actually there is a little bit of sediment in here, just a hair.
Okay.
So viscosity, I would say is medium. Yep, medium, not medium plus.
Good.
On the nose, no flaws. I'd say intensity is medium, possibly medium plus. I'm gonna call it medium.
Because I would tell you that if it was medium plus intensity, you wouldn't say possibly, because if it was medium plus intensity, it would be grabbing your nose.
Right, right.
Medium, totally.
Definitely like a lot of red fruits. So we got cranberries, red cherries, strawberry, more of I would say like tart cherries. So in this sense, I would say this is probably ripe or maybe overripe.
No, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I
Mhm.
mean, because I wouldn't be a good instructor if I didn't remind you of what you said. So
Okay,
I'm going to learn how to listen better in life. And I want you to think about listening to your very own words. So you said tart cranberry.
right.
You said the second thing you said, which I believe actually, because you said it first, and then you
Mhm.
said, oh, it's overripe. No, you mean underripe. So
Under, okay,
it's tart or it's overripe, and this is a good correction, because I think sometimes we just have to take a pause when we're describing wine, especially when we're describing wine out loud. Sometimes we feel like we have to fill the space, um, but we don't. We can just say to ourselves, I get some tart fruit,
right.
cranberry, oh, underripe red fruit. I think that's probably perfect.
Okay, awesome.
Good. Okay, so underripe red fruit. I'm sorry to mess up your groove.
No, 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 you're good. You're good. This is perfect because this is what I need. So, um, all right. And so non-fruit aromas almost get like chocolate or a mocha or something like that.
Cool.
Um, there's not really that much presence of, I wouldn't say that there's any new wood with this, possibly neutral oak.
Okay.
And age in this, I would say it has some age, but not a lot. So, and reason being because I feel like I also am getting a little bit of like tertiary aromas, but they're so like on the back end that they're like, it's almost like a mushroom or earth, forest floor, something like that. It's just like hidden on the back end there on the palate.
Great.
So this wine is definitely red fruits, definitely confirming the cranberry red cherries. Acidity is medium.
Okay, so I'm looking at your mouth, which I actually want people to look at each other's in tasting groups.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, thankfully, we're not together because then I wouldn't be able to see because I'd have a mask on and you would too.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting because you said acid is medium, and I'm looking at you go.
Because I was on the verge of saying medium plus, and I was like evaluating if it was right on the. To me, it's like it's almost like on the edge where I could perceive it as being medium, but I wanted to like kind of let it sit there for a second and see if like, okay, is my mouth still salivating? And so I was in the range of like medium plus. So thank you for like catching that, because I was sitting there, I'm like, okay, is this medium?
I sometimes look around, or again, I think we're all our own really good mirrors. So one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about bringing people together in wine is because I want everyone to have like that memory of like, oh, I was with Vincent and he was tasting and I noticed he was like he was doing that. So next time I'm in between and I want to call it medium and medium plus, I'm going to go, did I just salivate? And the other reason it's important is because in the tasting, these clues are not about getting it right or wrong in terms of actually what it is, because no one can take that wine from your bottle, put it in a measuring lab and say, oh no, Vincent, it's medium or it's medium plus. The only reason we're using those is so that we can get the wine right.
Right.
So if we're thinking medium, we might go warm climate. If we think medium plus, we might go old climate or old world cool climate. So, I think that it probably feels, and again, if we're using shapes, medium acid would maybe be, oh, the wine feels round. Medium acid might be the wine felt round for a second and then it went like narrow.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a decanter, it's wide and then it goes to a neck. I think, again, I mean, I don't know the wine right this second because I'm not drinking it, but I think that you would say, oh, great, yes, it makes sense why you weren't sure, because at first it was round and then it went sour.
Right.
Okay, good. And I just decided like a few weeks ago, I'm Vincent's gonna be, I'm gonna be mentoring Vincent, so I'm very happy about that. So I'm especially proud to give him minor modifications. My Pilates instructor is always modifying my poses, so these are
Moderate.
These are not corrections.
I really, really appreciate it.
Tell me about tannins.
Tannins. So tannins to me, they're not grippy.
Okay.
I would say that they're like, I feel the tannins definitely on the front of my mouth, but it's almost like I would say I'm leaning to the medium and not medium minus, because it's like it's present. It's not like they're fine, but they're still like integrated in the wine well enough that it's like I know that they're there.
Okay. Sounds like you're describing the right amount of tannin. Okay, so medium tannin. Okay.
Alcohol is definitely medium. It's not like I don't get the heat on the back of my mouth.
Good.
And the finish, two, three, four, five. I'd say medium plus. I'm gonna stick with medium plus. So I would say that this is definitely old world, cool climate. Age range, I would say that this might have about 3 years on it.
Based on what you described.
Yeah. So I'll say final conclusion, 2016 or 20, well, because I'm not that good with like knowing the vintages in old world, but I'd say 2017, possibly Pinot Noir, from France, and quality level, well, actually, region, I would say this is tricky because it's like obviously most Pinot Noirs would be from Burgundy, but sub-region that I'm not.
That's okay. You're going to learn. You're going to have a theory guru for your assistant. It sounds like you could say it could be Pinot Noir, it could be Gamay.
Mm-hmm.
Purple color was maybe a little bit too color, the way you described the purple of ruby, maybe
Mm-hmm.
too much for Pinot Noir. But it could be Pinot Noir, and if it was, maybe it could be from the Côte de Beaune or the Côte de Nuit. Those are the two regions in Burgundy.
Okay.
We had perhaps Gamay from Beaujolais, which could make more sense with the color.
Right.
So we unwrap it, and let's say what is this wine? I know, but the big reveal for Vincent, I think. And for those of you that had that wine, you probably were tasting it along, and so maybe you had a similar conclusion or somewhat different. I'm gonna see here.
Oh, nice.
What do we have? You got a Fleurie, yes. So
Fleurie, yeah.
great. So we have Beaujolais.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so this was a Fleurie region, the Cru Beaujolais, that has a little bit more of the floral purple tone. I think you did a great job describing the wine. I really loved hearing that, and I love the progress too.
Thank you.
So good. All right, everyone. This is me saying you are all beautiful people. I love seeing your faces. I cannot wait till next week. Next week, we're going to talk about TDN, which is the compound that we find in Riesling. But we're also going to talk about minerality and things like petrichor and all these other crazy things that give us like lots of funky, weird mineral smells in wine. And we'll talk about salinity. We'll talk about all that. So thank you so much. And we will see you again next week, Monday, 7:30. Be there, be square. Take care, guys. Bye. Stop record. Good job, Vincent.